The glass wall of my office reflected a woman my family still wouldn't recognize. I stood there in a soft ivory blouse, sleeves rolled just enough to show the thin gold watch on my wrist. Below me, downtown Chicago moved like a living thing. Cars sliding through intersections, people rushing with purpose. The building hummed quietly, steady and dependable. Just like the life I'd built in silence. My phone buzzed against my palm. Family group chat. Someone had sent an old photo of me at the dining table years ago, smiling too tightly, clutching a mug like it could protect me. The caption read, "Remember when Sarah said she only had $3,200 saved?" Followed by laughing emojis. My chest tightened. Even now, they still thought that moment defined me. Back then, when I said that number out loud, the room had exploded with laughter. Not cruel, not screaming, but dismissive. The kind that shrinks you. The kind that teaches you to stop talking. I exhaled slowly, adjusting the ring on my finger. Outside, a delivery truck pulled up to the curb below, right on time. Rent day. The predictable rhythm of ownership. Another buzz. This time a private message. "We're all meeting this weekend," my brother wrote. "You should come. We're worried about you." I smiled just a little. They still believed I was surviving. They had no idea I was standing inside the very thing they thought I'd never become, security, built brick by brick, quietly, patiently. And for the first time in years, I wondered if it was finally time to stop hiding behind silence. The memory still lived in my body, not my mind. Every time someone laughed too loud, my shoulders remembered that night. It was my aunt's dining room. Too bright, too crowded, the smell of roasted chicken clinging to the air. I had been sitting at the far end of the table, my hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, even though the coffee inside had already gone cold. Someone had asked the question so casually. "So, Sarah, how are things going financially?" I hesitated. I should have lied. I felt it then, that instinct to protect myself, but honesty slipped out before fear could stop it. "I've saved about $3,200, I said, forcing a small smile. "I'm working on something bigger, though." The silence lasted half a second. Then came the laughter. Not everyone at once, no, that would have been easier. It came in waves. A chuckle from my cousin. A scoff from my uncle. My brother shaking his head like I'd just confessed to believing in fairy tales. $3,200? Someone repeated. "At your age?" I felt heat crawl up my neck. My fingers tightened around the mug so hard I thought it might crack. My mother didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just sighed, the way people do when they've already decided you're a disappointment. "Sweetheart," my aunt said gently, which somehow hurt more, "you can't build a future on numbers like that." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The room blurred for a moment. I focused on my breathing.
In, out.
Don't cry. Don't give them that. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the laughter had moved on to someone else's life choices, my grandmother found me on the back porch. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a small brass key, warm from her palm. "I bought my first property without telling a soul," she said quietly. "People don't respect seeds. They only respect trees." I looked at the key, confused. "Promise me something," she added. "Don't explain yourself while you're still building." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh, every look. And somewhere between the hurt and the humiliation, something settled inside me. I stopped wanting their approval. I wanted ownership. So the next morning, I opened a new notebook, wrote one sentence on the first page, and made myself a promise. I will never announce my plans again. I will let results speak. That was the day I stopped asking for permission to become someone else. I didn't wake up wealthy. I woke up disciplined. My days started before sunrise in a studio apartment that smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee. I worked a regular job during the day. Nothing impressive, nothing that would have made my family rethink their assumptions. At night, I became someone else entirely. I studied. Commercial real estate wasn't glamorous from the inside. It was spreadsheets, zoning laws, lease structures, and risk that didn't care whether you were a woman or not. Still, people did. More than once, I watched a man's eyes slide past me in meetings, searching for the real decision-maker. I learned not to flinch. I met Marianne Holt at a community investment workshop held in the basement of a public library. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, and unapologetically direct. When I told her what I wanted to do, she didn't smile. She asked me how many hours a week I was willing to give up my comfort. Everything, I said. She nodded once. Good. Most people quit before the numbers even get hard. Marianne taught me how to read opportunity instead of fear, how to negotiate without apologizing, how to walk away from a deal that didn't respect me. I carried my grandmother's brass key in my bag like a talisman, rubbing it between my fingers before difficult conversations. There were nights I cried alone in my car, convinced I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Nights when I checked my bank balance and wondered if my family had been right all along. Then came the first win. A small retail lease. Nothing flashy, just a dependable tenant who paid on time. When the first check cleared, I sat on my kitchen floor and laughed until my cheeks hurt. It wasn't about the money. It was proof. I reinvested everything. I upgraded my knowledge before my lifestyle. No new clothes. No announcements. When my family asked how I was doing, I kept my answers soft and unspecific. Busy, I'd say. Learning. Online, my life looked small. No vacations. No luxury. Just quiet progress hidden behind neutral colors and early mornings. The building came later. An aging commercial property no one wanted, cracked sidewalks, outdated interiors, potential everyone else missed. I saw steady foot traffic. Long-term leases. Stability. I signed the papers with hands that didn't shake. Renovations took months. I learned patience the hard way, through delays, budget overruns, and constant problem-solving. But when the last unit filled and the numbers settled, something inside me exhaled for the first time in years. The building didn't just make money. It made me solid. By the time the final payment cleared, I owned it outright. A $2.4 million commercial building, quietly, completely, legally mine. Still, I said nothing. Because I'd learned something important on that back porch years ago. Seeds grow best in silence. They arrived expecting a version of me that no longer existed. I watched them from my office doorway as the elevator door slid open. My brother first, scanning the floor like he'd taken a wrong turn, then my mother, clutching her purse a little too tightly, followed by my aunt and uncle whispering under their breath. Their eyes moved slowly, taking in the polished concrete floors, the framed architectural sketches on the walls, the quiet confidence of a space. No one spoke at first. "This place is nice," my aunt said finally. The word nice stretched thin with confusion. "Thank you," I replied, stepping forward in heels that clicked softly against the floor. I hadn't planned that detail, but I noticed it anyway, the sound of my footsteps, steady and unhurried. They followed me into the conference room. Sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling across a long walnut table. On the far wall hung a black and white photograph of the building's original facade, taken decades ago. My building. My brother leaned toward my mother. "This is where you work?" I poured water into glasses, the carafe cool against my fingers. Among other things. They sat. I didn't rush. Silence has weight when you know how to use it. My uncle cleared his throat. "So, how have you been managing, Sarah? We were worried. You've always been so private." I smiled, polite and careful. The same smile I'd practiced years ago. But this time, it wasn't armor. "I've been well," I said. "Stable." My mother glanced around again, her eyes lingering on the view. Streets, storefronts, movement. "This must cost a fortune to rent." I set my glass down. "I don't rent." They all looked at me then. My brother laughed lightly, out of habit. "Right. I mean, of course. I just meant. I own it," I said calmly. The laughter died mid-breath. "I own the building," I repeated. "All of it." The room went still in a way that felt almost physical, like the air had thickened. My aunt blinked. "This building?" "Yes." My uncle leaned back in his chair, disbelief written across his face. "Sarah, this place has to be worth 2.4 million. I finished for him. Commercial valuation as of last quarter." My brother stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." I reached into my bag and slid a folder onto the table. No drama. No flourish. Just facts, deeds, leases, statements. The paper made a soft sound as it landed, louder than it should have been. My mother's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. You said you had $3,000, she whispered. "I did," I said gently. "At the time." My aunt's face flushed. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" I thought of the laughter. The porch. The key. "Because when I did tell you things," I replied, "you laughed." No one argued. My brother rubbed his jaw, eyes fixed on the table. "So all this time," I said, "I was building." The realization moved through them one by one, shock giving way to something heavier. Regret. Recalibration. The uncomfortable awareness that they had underestimated the wrong person. My mother looked up at me, then really looked. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't see you." I nodded. "I know." Outside the window, the city kept moving, unaware that something had shifted inside this room. I felt it, though, a quiet transfer of power. Not loud, not cruel, just final. For the first time, they weren't measuring me against their expectations. They were trying to catch up to my reality. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly at the head of the table, waiting to see who speaks first. They looked at me differently now, carefully, like the ground beneath them had shifted and they weren't sure where it was safe to stand. I noticed the small things. The way my brother avoided my eyes. How my aunt folded her hands, suddenly unsure. My mother sat very still, as if movement might break something fragile between us. "You could help us," my uncle said finally. Not demanding. Almost hopeful. I met his gaze. "I could." The word hung there, balanced. "But help isn't the same as rescue," I continued. "And it's not a reward for doubting me." My brother frowned. "What does that mean?" It meant everything. "I'll help," I said, "on conditions." They leaned in, all of them. "For you?" I said, turning to my brother. "No more blaming bad luck for choices you keep repeating. If I invest in you, you finish what you start. No quitting halfway." He swallowed, then nodded. I faced my aunt. "You don't get to speak about me like I'm fragile anymore. Not to my face. Not behind my back." Her cheeks flushed, but she said quietly, "Fair." I turned to my mother last. This was the hardest. "I don't need you to brag about me," I said softly. "I need you to trust me without proof. To stop worrying out loud like I'm about to fall apart." Tears filled her eyes. "I can try." "Try is enough," I said. I wasn't angry. That surprised me the most. I felt clear, grounded, like a woman who finally understood her worth wasn't up for negotiation. "If we move forward," I added, "we do it with respect, transparency, and no more laughing at beginnings." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then my brother exhaled. "You're different." I smiled, just slightly. "No. I'm the same. You're just seeing me clearly now." We didn't hug. This wasn't that kind of moment. But something settled between us, an unspoken agreement that the old dynamic was gone. As they stood to leave, my aunt paused near the door. "I'm proud of you," she said, awkward but sincere. I believed her. When the elevator doors closed behind them, I sat alone for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the building around me. My building. The one that had given me more than income, it had given me leverage, choice, and peace. I reached into my bag and touched the brass key, smooth from years of being carried. Power wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about never needing their permission again. Change didn't arrive loudly. It came in smaller, quieter ways. My brother started showing up when he said he would. Not just to meetings, but to his own life. He stopped asking for shortcuts and began asking better questions. My aunt grew careful with her words, learning, slowly, that respect is a habit, not a performance. And my mother learned silence. Not the worried kind. The trusting kind. The kind where she no longer checked in to make sure I was okay, but simply asked how my day had been, then listened to the answer without bracing for bad news. I noticed these things the way women do, through tone, through pauses, through what wasn't said anymore. Some evenings, after the building had settled into its nighttime quiet, I stayed late in my office. I'd slip off my heels, flex my tired feet against the cool floor, and stand by the window with a cup of coffee I never quite finished. The city lights reminded me how far I'd come from that cramped apartment with the burnt smell and restless nights. I thought about the girl at the dining table, the one gripping a mug like it could shield her from laughter. She hadn't been weak. She'd been early. I reached into my desk drawer and took out the brass key. I didn't need it anymore. The locks had changed long ago, but I kept it anyway. Not as a reminder of pain, but of patience, of the wisdom in building quietly, of knowing when to speak and when to let time do the talking for you. People think success is loud, that it needs witnesses. But the truth is, the most powerful transformations happen when no one is watching. I never corrected the old story. Some of my relatives still joked about that night, about the number I'd shared. I let them, because it was true. I really did only have $3,200. What they didn't understand was that money was never the whole picture. What I had was discipline, vision, the courage to keep going after being laughed at. Ownership didn't just change my finances. It changed how I stood in rooms, how I spoke, how I valued my own voice. As I locked my office door that night, the building hummed around me, steady, secure, mine. And I smiled, thinking one simple thought, the kind that settles deep and stays. They laughed at my savings. I built my future in silence.